Hello, Nick here, Lunar Awakening. Well, I aim to be a guiding compass towards others that are also looking to go on a journey towards spiritual enlightenment. So this is my second video. I had a few technical glitches on the first one. Firstly, I didn't realise that the lens that I had was not a silent lens, so really sorry if you can hear it focusing. I tend to move around a lot in my videos, so I've managed to get one that autofocuses without having that annoying noise in the background. And I also managed to replace my chair because, unbeknown to me, my wheelie chair clicks a lot. So if you can hear some weird clicking noises, that was my chair. So I've replaced it with a nice wooden one, and hopefully we won't have the same problem again. So what are we going to do in this second instalment? So today I want to talk about the different levels of conscious awareness, why they're important, what they are, and to start giving you some ideas as to how you could potentially move through the different layers of consciousness. So I've got a book here, Power versus Force. It's by David Hawkins. I would thoroughly recommend a read of this. Just reading the book alone will raise your level of consciousness even just by a fraction of a point. But that's really good because we all need to work on raising our consciousness awareness, because it's just so liberating when you do, when you move through those stages and you're seeing life with new perspectives. It's really liberating. Yeah, I mean, that's my experience anyway. So I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the video. So what are the different layers of consciousness? So to start with, everything has conscious awareness or consciousness within it. So everything resonates with an energy field. And what David managed to do is there's like a test you can do. You hold your arm out like this, and then someone will push two fingers down on your shoulder, and if you manage to stay strong, so like if someone says to me, "Is your name Nick?" then my arm's going to stay strong because that's true. And if someone says, "Is your name Sue?" my arm's going to go really weak because that's not my name, it's false. And you can do this with anything. You could say like is a vegetable, what level does a vegetable resonate at? And they found that it was like around the 100 mark. So there's different layers of consciousness. So lower levels are things like apathy, guilt, shame, desire, anger, pride. So they're all negative layers of consciousness. So someone resonating in that range of the scale, they're going to have quite like a negative experience in life. Because predominantly they're pushing all of their problems external to them. They don't take ownership. So that's the case of someone blaming society for all the things that are wrong in their life. And someone who's like anger, for example, it's got quite a lot of energy to it in terms of an emotional state. But it's really negative because it's like a mixture of desire and frustration. And it's really toxic because, anyone knows that when you see someone in like a rage, like that's not a healthy feeling state to be in. It's not good for your body and certainly not good for your mind. So yeah, you don't want to be in those states. And like when you start getting up to the middle range of the scale, that's things like courage. So someone at courage is now able to, look at their own circumstances and think positively about changing them. So it's just like making that shift between, is it everyone else's fault to maybe I can do something about this? And maybe you don't quite know what to do, but you're willing. Like what you've got the sort of, you're not even willing, because that's another stage in itself, but you're sort of opening your mind to the potential that there might be something better out there. So when you look at a lot of like health and well-being stuff, that's where it's like you have to have that you have to have that goal in mind that maybe things could get better, and then they often do, because you're now looking at it from a slightly different angle, but an angle that gives it some breadth. There's a little bit of space there now to work with. Whereas when you're very rigid in your mindset, like when you're just full of grief or full of anger and you're just focused on one view, there's no room to look at the other side and think, okay, maybe there's something worth considering that's over here. So courage is one up from pride. So you've got pride, and pride is quite negative because when you're operating at pride, you are focused on yourself still. So you might be looking to society like you're contributing positively to the greater good because you're you're serving your own interests is the best way that I can describe it. So you're not really serving society because you're still serving yourself, because any decision that you make within pride is still based on a fear that your representation, your internal dialogue, can be shattered by an external force. So if you imagine like someone's in a job and they lose that job, then they might go into a feeling state of shame, which is like one of the lowest ones. So pride is very easy to knock back off its pedestal because it's made on false pretenses. It's still being built by the external rather than the internal. So the internal is, within yourself, what feels good inside. So, right, so you got pride, then we move on to courage. Now we're giving ourselves some space. We're looking at potential opportunities here. And then you move up again into neutrality. So neutrality is like looking at the world through a neutral lens. So rather than like it's all good or it's all bad, you're just looking at it neutral. You don't have an opinion one way or the other. And you're not trying to force situations. You're not trying to say my way is right and their way is wrong. You just sort of sit back and you just accept that things are neutral. Like acceptance is another word again. So I'm trying to choose my words really carefully here. So I'll move on to willingness. So willingness is like we start to see some real inroads here. Someone resonating or calibrating at willingness, they are like open to new ideas. And they're going to drive those ideas forward. Like they've got energy within them to realize that there's potential for change. And they understand maybe even the areas that they do need to change. There's that acceptance in themselves that, there's potentially some work to be done here. And, they're going to look at seeing ways of doing it, like of uncovering issues that they're having in their life and working through them. So willingness is really powerful. And after willingness, you then have acceptance. So I'm using the same words at different levels of the stages, but it's quite hard not to. So acceptance is like you just accept the world and yourself as it is. And you're not fighting, you're at peace with the situations in your life. And it's just like probably one of the most powerful stages that you can get to, because you're not in a state of battle, with yourself. Like you're not trying to fight to change yourself. And I don't know if you remember in the first video I was saying about, like Weight Watchers and Alcoholics Anonymous, and like one of the first things that you have to do in order to get really get better is to accept. And when you've accepted that you have that problem, then because you're accepting it, you're then having no more resistance to it, and you're much more likely to be able to let it go. And then when you can let it go, you can then work on resolving what it was. Because when you're in resistance, you're keeping it held close to you. It's always at the forefront of your mind, and your thoughts become your reality. So if you're thinking, I'm overweight, or I'm a drug addict, or I'm an alcoholic, or something along these lines, then that's always in your mind's eye. So therefore, that's what you're always going to be focusing on. So your mind is going to be thinking about food, alcohol, drugs, partying, whatever. So that's what acceptance is like. Okay, I have this problem and it's okay. Like I don't need to fight it anymore. I don't need to battle it anymore. And then when you let it go, you're opening up again even more space for other things to fill it. So you can't have more come into your life without creating a vacuum. So you have to let things go in order for better things to come into the glass. Like if you imagine it like a glass full of water, you can't just keep pouring water into it. It's going to overfill and it won't be able to hold the volume of what is going on. So you have to tip some out, create the space, and then the glass will fill up with the new stuff, which, if you're now in a higher state of conscious awareness, well then, it's going to be better stuff, because you're not going to be pulling around all the shame and the guilt and the anger and the frustration and the desires and the pride. You're not going to have all of that weighing you down. You're just going to be like, right, I can now look at life from my perspective and not from what I think the external society is doing or making me feel or say or act. So there's even more levels over and above acceptance. So we've got reason. And reason is like Albert Einstein was at reason. Newton was at reason. These are people who are exceptionally intelligent, and they calibrate, really highly, and they're intellectuals, and they can put across a good argument. And but still, when I say argument, I mean it as in an educational sense of the word. They can put concepts together with their mind and explain them to other people, and so they're intellectuals. But the one above intellectualism, reason, is love. And they never calibrated above that. And when we talk about this kind of love, we're not talking about like, oh, I love my cat, or I love my dog, or I love cricket. Like, it's not that sort of thing. It's like love as in we are one. The one love. So that single, it's like when you realise that we're all consciously connected and you just love everyone, because you realise that what is in you is in someone else, and what is in someone else is in you. And you stop having this sort of need to compete with everyone, or to compare with everyone, or to like think, oh, I didn't get to climb that mountain. You sort of like know that you did climb that mountain 50 million times, because 50 million other people climb that mountain, and you're all one. We all share the same experiences. And it's a really hard concept to like understand. It's actually making me feel a bit tearful, and I don't know why, but like it's just really hard to understand if you're not resonating at that level. But when you understand that we are all one and the same, and we're all connected, like it's just quite magical. Like you just let things go, like to the real extent that you can just be happy and at peace. You don't need to think, oh, I need to go on this really exotic holiday because I'd still like to go on that holiday, but I don't feel like I have this burning desire to. And desire was one of the really low states, And anger would be frustration at not being able to go on that holiday. So that's even worse. Like, because now you're in like this anger. No one likes to be around angry people, but anyway, I for one don't. Right, so then you've got joy above love, and this is where you love, and then joy is like bringing that element of fun and lightness into the equation. Because even at love, your heart could probably still feel a bit heavy. But joy is just letting things go. Like you're just walking on cloud 9, and nothing can really penetrate that. When you get to these sorts of levels, joy, peace and enlightenment, the top 3, when you're sort of hanging around in that sphere, then even if you met an angry person, they're not going to even have a chink in your armour, because you're just so enlightened and so at peace with yourself and so just settled. And you can actually look at that person and think, I feel for them, and I send them my love, and I want them to, do their own work so that they can feel better. Like it's just wanting the best for them. That's how, like, when I try and think of like what I want to be like, that's my aim. It's to see someone who's angry, not feel sorry for them, because that's pity. I don't want pity. That's also pretty rubbish. You just want to send love to them and say, I wish you well, and you will get better. Just to have that faith in them. So when you're at the level of courage, that's a really important point of the scale. When you're at the point of courage, you stop being a drain on society. Like everyone else below that level, they are trying to control their environment, and they're blaming their external situation. So they blame the external, so they're not doing the inner work, so they're not helping themselves, and they're not even willing to look at themselves and how they might be able to help. So that's a really negative state below courage. But courage, you start to be sort of balanced neutral, and then as you move up to sort of neutrality, willingness, and anything above that, then you're actually now giving back to society, and you're not taking away anymore. So that's a really good point, like to try and aim for. It's just even to be neutral, to stop sending aggression to situations, to just accept that there are people that have different opinions, and not to feel like you need to control that situation. That's the best thing you can do if that's how you're operating at the moment, is to just try and take a neutral perspective on anything that's going on in your life. And, you know, I can talk more about that in future videos because, you know, I don't want to cover this in this one. But I think that'd be a really good thing for me to talk about, how you might go about that. So this is another really fascinating thing. So in this book, they also then, Power versus Force by David Hawkins, they also looked at like how many people in the world are currently resonating at these different stages, and how many people does it need to counterbalance all the people at the lower levels. Because if the majority of society resonates below courage, which is the current situation, then how many people does it take to counterbalance all that negativity? So I just got a few statistics here, so sorry, I just need to look to remember. But love, someone resonating at love, which is 500 on the scale, one person at that level counterbalances 750,000 individuals below the level of 200. And someone resonating at 700, they counterbalance 70 million people below the level of 200. So one person who resonates at, I think 700 is peace, but counterbalances 70 million people below 200, below courage. So anyone who's pride, anger, guilt, apathy, shame, 70 million people. That is huge. And that's why, like, the global consciousness is rising. The book talks about that as well. So I'm getting most of my information from this book. So if it's of interest to you what I'm speaking about, definitely give it a read. And so, you know, you don't actually need that many people to be spiritually enlightened in order to do good for the rest of the world. So you raising your conscious awareness and doing that inner work, that will help so many people in the world. And this is what I meant by, in my first video, you do your inner work and you give back to society. It's simple as that. So when I say inner work, what am I really talking about? So if you think about your childhood, a lot of people experience things like guilt and shame in their childhood. You know, it could be that you said the wrong thing at a family gathering and your mum gives you a look and then you suddenly feel guilt or you feel shame. And that feeling will sit in your body and it will stay there. And unless you do your inner work, you know, it will just hang around and it will just be like festering. And we don't want that. So you have to do your inner work. So to do your inner work, you know, you have to sort of look inside and think, where were those points in my life where I felt trauma? Because it's just trauma, basically. And when you find those spots and you work through those spots and you try and take a new perspective with them and you realise that, you know, your mum was just acting on her social instincts at that time and it wasn't actually directed at you. It wasn't a personal dig at you that you said this thing. It was just that was the thing that she learned to do because that's what her mother taught her to do, etc., etc. Then, yes, you get all this shame and guilt instilled in you in childhood, and you basically have to work to undo all of that conditioning. And as you undo that conditioning, in the spiritual world, people call it your shadow. And as you take the shadow away, like you remove parts of your shadow, more light gets to shine through. And the light is your consciousness. Is the consciousness of the whole, the collective consciousness shines through. So with your inner work, you have to make the invisible visible, because most people, they're not actually aware of what those things are that happened in their past. Like, you'll probably walk around now and you know that you don't like it when people look at you a certain way, but you have no understanding as to where that started from or how it happened. But that probably was like an event in your childhood where you went to go and buy an ice cream and the ice cream man looked at you that way and made you feel uncomfortable. And if that happens enough times, then you start to learn that this is an uncomfortable feeling, and it sort of get wedged into your mind, into your body as this bad feeling state. And every time that look then happens in your life, you're then like taken back to being a 7-year-old child trying to buy ice cream, and then you're feeling all distressed again. But you don't understand that. You don't link it back to the ice cream man when you're 7. You just feel it when you're now 32, trying to have a job and sitting in a business meeting, someone gives you a look and now you're like, I don't know what's going on. But instead of like thinking, this is because of when I was a child, you think, that guy's an arsehole. He made me feel this way. And you lash out at them. And so this is why you have to do the inner work. So basically, bringing conscious awareness to the thought patterns that were driven by past experiences. That's the best way I can summarize what steps you should really take with this. So I hope that that's been a good introduction into the different layers of conscious awareness. It's definitely something I've worked on over the years. I used to definitely resonate at grief, then I went up to anger for a bit. Pride got the better of me. You know, I was all about having the successful career, being the, you know, going on all these nice holidays, and I really thought that that was what defined me as a person. And then I sort of learned that it's not, so I started changing my life again. And then, you know, moving into courage, now I'm moving into sort of like willingness and acceptance. I accept my past, I accept the things that have happened to me. I like to think, you know, maybe I'm even moving up further than that, and I'm experiencing elements of love and peace and joy. Like, I definitely feel really peaceful at times, and it's magical. But there are still times when I don't. There's still times when I will slide back into anger if there's like been an event that happened and I think, and then I have to sort of do the inner work and be like, well, where did that come from? Because it's going to come from something. Like, my body learned to feel angry in this situation, so where did that happen? So then I jot it down on a notepad and I take it to my therapist and I say, look, this happened, and we work through it. And by doing that, you know, I'm just feeling a lot lighter as a person. It's a feeling of lightness. Like, I'm growing. I feel invigorated. I feel like empowered. It's fantastic. So yeah, I hope that's been a really good like introduction into the different layers of conscious awareness. Some small ideas there as to how you could potentially start moving up the ladder. I've done a blog as well on this, so I will put a link in the description box below. If you like what you hear, please comment and put a like, comment and subscribe. I will get used to saying this eventually. But thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to hearing from you in the comments below. Take care all. See you then. Bye.